Evening. I'm Erin Boucher, Chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee. Welcome to our meeting for Wednesday, March 11th. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Cellcom channels 29 and 329 and streamed live on Shrewsbury Media Connection's website. Thank you to Liz Poplowski and Shrewsbury Media Connection for their assistance with our broadcast. Tonight's meeting will be rebroadcast on SMC's website and their YouTube channel between now and our next scheduled meeting. The first item on the agenda is public participation. Tonight, we have not received any requests to speak at public participation. Public participation is available to all residents who would like to address the committee regarding concerns of policy, budget, and the performance of the superintendent. In the future, if anyone should wish to speak at public participation, they should contact the chairperson in advance of our next scheduled school committee meeting. The next item on the agenda is chairperson and members' reports. Colleagues, anything this evening?
That's not okay.
And the next item on our agenda this evening is the superintendent's report. Dr. Sawyer?
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. I just want to let the community know and encourage them to attend our annual Shrewsbury High School musical. It will be taking place the next 3 evenings, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights at 7 p.m. That's March 12th, 13th, and 14th. This year's show is The Drowsy Chaperone. I'm told it is excellent, as always, and looking forward to seeing that production again this year. So members of the public are welcome to buy tickets at the door, again at Shrewsbury High School in the auditorium on the 12th, 13th, and 14th at 7 p.m. and break a leg to all the cast members. I also wanted to recognize that recently the winter sports season concluded. I want to congratulate all the teams at Oak Middle School and Shrewsbury High School that competed. A couple of highlights. I know that our middle school boys basketball team went undefeated, which was terrific. And I know there's recently an article that Officer Dylan Zona, who's our school resource officer at the middle school level, was also the coach of that team. And congratulations to that team on their success. And also at the high school boys basketball team, longtime coach Adrian Machado and longtime assistant coach Jerry Nowosaki both retired at the end of the season. They were both honored at the last regular season home game. Coach Machado coached for 21 years, had over 200 victories, but most importantly, as some of the articles in the news have shown, really made a very positive impact on his student athletes over the years. Coach Nowosaki also the same. We're very pleased and proud that they had such a successful tenure as coaches in our program, and wish them the best in their retirement from coaching. And that is Superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. The next item on our agenda this evening is an update on the superintendent search. Since our last school committee meeting on February 25th, the 4 superintendent finalist candidates, Todd Bidzidlo, Reuben Duncan, Tiffany Ostrander, and David Thompson, have each spent the day in the district meeting with various stakeholders, touring our school buildings, interacting with staff and students throughout the day, and attending staff and community meet and greets, and concluding their day with interviews by the school committee. These visits provided opportunities for staff, families, and community members to meet the finalists and provide their feedback to the school committee. The school committee interviews with the superintendent candidates are now available on SMC's YouTube channel, and QR codes to provide feedback to the school committee are embedded in the videos of the interviews. Feedback will be accepted until midnight on March 12th, tomorrow. The school committee will now be visiting the 4 candidates' home districts starting tomorrow. Following the completion of the site visits to the finalist districts, the review of feedback from staff, students, families, and community members, the school committee will deliberate next Wednesday, March 18th, to select the new superintendent of schools. The new superintendent will work with Dr. Sawyer during his remaining months in the district to ensure a smooth transition of leadership that positions our district well for continued success. On behalf of the school committee, we'd like to thank you for your engagement with this process and your commitment to our schools. The next item on our agenda this evening is an update on the student literacy presentation and report. Ms. Clowder has provided an update to the school committee on the implementation of a new literacy program that aligns instructional practices with the science of reading research. At our meeting tonight, students representing different grade levels will have the opportunity to present information about their work. So good evening, Ms. Clowder.
Good evening. It's really nice to see so many people here, isn't it? Hold on one second while I bring this up. The first part is really going to be just me giving everyone an update around what our literacy data is showing. And then from there, the real stars of the show will take over. Okay. So I'm excited to be here as the second of one of several presentations focused on literacy, and grateful for your support and the opportunity you provided me and the staff and our students to show their skills. This is just a slide to remind us that we're in year one of full implementation K-8. 7 and 8 came online with our new curriculum. And when we think about the components of a new curriculum, we talked a little bit about how well it aligns with Scarborough's rope. We talked first about foundational reading skills when we showcased the work of our kindergarten, first and second graders. And tonight we're going to focus on grades 3, 4, and 5. And one of the things we've chosen to highlight is how writing and reading are integrated, both because those are key components of kind of language comprehension, that upper side of the rope, but also because we recognized, as you might recall from looking at our MCAS data, that we had real opportunities in writing. And so we wanted to show how that was also featured in the new curriculum. Today there's two topics. I'm going to talk a little bit about the achievement results, and then you're going to hear from our students directly. And initially I would just want to share kind of how the annual comparison of winter 2025 to winter 2026 shows up. So this is the percentage of kids who qualify for reading intervention. And you can see that the total percentage receiving different types of support for reading has dropped, particularly K to 4. So we often say that you can't intervene your way out of a lacking Tier 1 curriculum. So this is a good indication that the curriculum shifts we've made have resulted in better student outcomes. You have a more detailed report in your book, but essentially it highlights for me kind of the benefit of and the effectiveness of intervening early. When we have strong foundation, it's easier to close gaps for students. And we continue to work on thinking about how we support students appropriately at the middle level when both the standards, the expectations have gotten higher, and we know that those students missed out on some of the initial rollout of the curriculum. I think one of the things that's also kind of interesting about this chart is that you can look at it diagonally to see, 42% of last year's kindergartners qualified for reading support. This year in first grade, far fewer of them need that support. And so although we can see that the strongest intervention data is coming from K4, at every grade you're seeing kind of that cohort piece look more promising. So for example, if I look at this kind of is a different way of looking at that table in graph form for K4. And you can see kind of the steady reduction in the percentage of students qualifying for support over time, starting with the winter of 24 and looking at last winter and then this winter in yellow. And that's thanks to the hard work of teachers and specialists alike. Tier 1 interventions happen like on the fly during a lesson, and teachers have really invested a lot of time and energy into what I need or win block practices that also provide students another layer of support, and then the reading specialists and tutors are another layer. So when we look at grades 5 to 8, we see it takes, the older the student, the longer it takes to close that gap, but we also see how the changing population at the middle level also kind of impacts that progress. So, for example, in response to one of your questions about the number of new students we were looking at Sherwood's roster of students receiving support, and 35 of the 68, or around 51% of them, were not with us for K1-2. So when you're missing the foundational piece or you're coming from a different system with a different experience, that also has an impact in kind of what students know and are able to do when they arrive with us. So this is more a graphic formation of kind of what I talked about when I was looking at the table diagonally. So when you expand it to look beyond this year, or even this year to last year, and look at trends over time, you can see that trend line for everybody in terms of the number of kids receiving support is really going down. And that's encouraging. It means that it's enabled us to focus on more nuanced assessments and supports. So we're not going to send fewer kids for support from the reading specialist, for example. We want them to have a full day, and they do too. But it gives us more capacity to support comprehension in other ways. And one of the questions you asked last year was kind of what happens to, where do they go when they're in intervention, and what does that look like? And so this year we've really focused on tracking students by, not just by cohort, which is what you see in these bright colors. So the kindergarten class is that pink dot because they are just starting to be tested this year. That's why they don't have a trend line yet. But then we look to see, at first grade and fourth grade specifically, kind of what happened to them. And I can tell you that in more detail for every grade. But this graph here, and bear with me for a little bit because it's not intuitive, shows that of the kids receiving support in September, so the red are students who are getting Tier 3 support with a reading specialist. Very few, no first graders are getting structured reading support, which would be support through an individualized education plan. Yellow would be 2B, or a literacy tutor or support outside the classroom. And 2A would be support during a WIN block. Then if you look over towards the January, you can see the kids moved from the tiers. So the blue, the number of kids receiving 2A support, many of those kids went back into Tier 1, which meant that they were supported really adequately through regular Tier 1 instruction. Some kids remained, so that you can see a little bit of the blue still there. You can see some kids are considered for structured reading. Some kids have moved out of the district, that's the gray. But that tells a story a little bit about how we can see changes in data cycles over time. And this is a measure where we're looking at proficiency, not just the number of kids who need support, but also how well are all kids meeting benchmarks. And this is telling us that we've seen more students performing better than their national peers by kind of looking at the kids that are, how well are we meeting national benchmarks, and how well do our kids compare to other kids in that grade level taking the test at the same time. So here you can see most recently in January, we scored better than 69% of students nationally, and that rate has been going up over time. Again, another indicator that we've invested our resources well. And then this is looking at proficiency by grade, and specifically comparing last year to this year. Overall, this is showing gradual improvements over time. So while we would love to see this, the yellow column go higher, I think it's going to take, implementation science tells us it's going to take some time between implementing a new curriculum and seeing outcomes for students. So this is kind of what we would expect to see. And we keep telling our educators and our students alike that our focus is really on progress over perfection. And we have a lot of perfectionists sitting behind me. So I hope that they see and feel validated by the data really echoing their hard work and their efforts. But the best way to see the power of this curriculum in action is to hear from our students themselves. And so I want to invite the rest of the team, the real stars of the show, forward. So come join me. So I'm hoping our instructional coaches and our curriculum coordinator for grades 5 to 8 can introduce our students. I'll introduce them. So this, in order of how they're standing, this is Lisa Daly, who works with grades 5 through 8, Michelle Thomas, who works as an instructional coach at Floral, Erin Kendrick, who's the instructional coach at Coolidge, Ashley Gallagher, who is at Patton, and Lisa Pagasian, who is at Beale. And they are instructional coach / curriculum coordinators because they do a myriad of things really well. But mostly they help us improve our collective practice. You guys take it away. I'll put this here. Do you want to come drive? Sure.
Okay. Great. All right. Good evening, school committee, Dr. Sawyer. I'm Erin Kendrick, instructional coach at Coolidge School, and I'm just so delighted to be here with some incredible student authors. and also my curriculum coordinator colleagues to share with you about informative writing in grades 3 to 5. I'd love to launch our time together with a quote, and I will give you a second to read it. In this room tonight, we have some burgeoning authors who have amazing habits like perseverance and collaboration and initiative. And they have support. As we know, there's a lot of fans here in the audience tonight. And they have really strategic instruction from their really, really dedicated teachers, some of whom are also here tonight. And our high... Shout out to the teachers. Welcome. Happy that you're here. They're so dedicated and working so hard to deliver this really high quality curriculum, EL. And these authors are ready to make their mark. And even though they may not have been writing for years and years and years formally yet, there is absolutely nothing amateur about the work that they're producing. And you're going to get to see that tonight. So we're really, really excited for that. I'm just going to frame our agenda for our time together. We set this up just like an EL lesson. So we're going to have a few openings that really will frame our work and focus us. Then we'll have a work time, and that's when we do the work. We are collaborative and action-oriented, and then we'll close with some reflection. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues and see you back in a bit.
Lisa Papazian, Instructional Coach Curriculum Coordinator at Beale School. And I'm just going to talk to you about the standards and how important it is that we're steeping our work in the standards. So in order to ensure effective instruction, it's really important that our teaching is aligned to both reading and writing standards, both within and across our grade levels. So we often think of standards like the rungs of a ladder. They build upon each other. We know students learn through reading, but they show their understanding of what they're learning through their writing. And each year builds on the learning from the year before. So with the adoption of EL, we have ensured that there's coherence within and across grade levels for how the standards build upon each other. Students have experiences both reading informative texts and writing to show their knowledge at each level that clearly builds upon the previous year's experience. Carefully selected texts help students to develop deep background knowledge and integrate their information across sources, which supports all readers. And the standards become more complex as students progress throughout the grades. And EL plans and accommodates for this. Tonight, you'll see with the use of predictable writing models, students gain confidence and know clear expectations when it comes to expressing their ideas in writing. Here you can see a couple of standards and how they progress throughout the grade levels in complexity. You can see each year takes what the foundation from the year before is and builds upon it. So whether they are researching and writing about a variety of frogs and how they survive, or choosing an animal and describing the defense mechanisms that they have, or analyzing an author's craft and showing how that author brings a habitat to life, they're building knowledge of previous year's skills. The structure that EL provides also allows teachers to intentionally connect new learning to what students have done in previous grades.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the rule of 3, which will give you some information about how students experience writing in the classroom. The rule of 3 is an instructional sequence that happens across all grades, and it's designed to support all students in the achievement of the high level of rigor of the reading and writing standards. The progression models the backward design is modeled after the backward design model, which starts with high levels of student support and gradually decreases the level of support that students experience until they're ultimately writing the piece on their own. All the writing that you'll see today is the product of students' independent writing. The product of that writing started with students analyzing a model of high-quality writing. The model of high-quality writing provides students with the language and the structure of the writing that they are going to need in order to write their own writing piece eventually on their own. Students will then engage in lessons collaboratively where they write a practice piece. This might mean that the class works together with the teacher in a shared writing of a practice piece, or it might mean that students partner up with another student and they write a practice essay together. And that provides them a scaffold with understanding the thinking skills and practicing the language and working with the content that they will need ultimately to move to independence. Then all students will ultimately write their own piece. And this happens across modules and throughout units at all grades. The level and the scope of independence changes over time. For example, the students today in 5th grade will be sharing a writing piece that they wrote on demand over 2 class periods. They had to read a text independently, analyze it on their own, develop a focus statement, compose and write their essay based on the organizational structure that they set up. And that high quality work that students are able to achieve is due to the Rule of 3 instructional sequence that they are able to experience.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Thomas. I am an instructional coach at Floral Street School, and just to share a little insight into what writing looks like, I'm sharing with you the Writing for Understanding approach. It was developed by the Vermont Writing Collaborative. It's driven by the philosophy that writing is always about constructing and communicating meaning. And so the first image there is just showing you that kids require deep knowledge in order to have something meaningful to communicate. The second image is sharing that it's important that kids have a structure in order to organize their writing so that it's comprehensible to the reader. And within that, we hit a little bit of author's craft in some of those writing elements. And then the last image is showing us that while students need deep knowledge and structure for the task at hand, they also need to be able to transfer that to future tasks. And so EL Education endorses the work by the Vermont Writing Collaborative, and we learn about the painted essay. That's essentially the structure that is driving how we are teaching writing. And you'll hear more from that from our resident experts who are going to break it down for you piece by piece.
Hi, Ashley Gallagher, instructional coach at Patton School. So we're just going to get a little bit deeper into what the painted essay looks like within EL, and then we'll hear from our students. So every EL module is grounded in guiding questions and big ideas. Module lessons focus on building students' content knowledge related to a compelling aspect of a science or social studies standard within that grade. Students read and reread and engage in multiple experiences on that topic. Unit 1 within a module tends to emphasize building strong and specific background knowledge, which means an emphasis on the close and careful reading of complex text. Students often write with evidence within Unit 1. In Unit 2, students are always going deeper on a topic. This often includes more extended reading and writing, and research as students read a greater variety of texts, and then will write to learn about the module topic. Unit 3 is unique in that it almost always includes extended writing of the performance task, in which students complete a high-quality scaffolded writing task and engage in a feedback and critique process to strengthen their writing. Scaffolded writing is balanced with on-demand writing assessments, and you'll see some of both of those tonight. Within the lessons, a research question helps students to narrow their thinking and identify the most important idea that they want to communicate in their writing. As students investigate sources, they use the research question to develop a clear focus statement that answers the research question. This focus is directly connected to the module's guiding question and the big ideas, ensuring that students' writing reflects the central targets of the module. You will hear more about the focus statement and the other components of the painted essay from our students.
So I'm going to introduce Rianchi, a 3rd grade student in Mrs. Campbell's class at Beale, and she's going to be our teacher. Like we would do any EL lesson in school, we start with learning targets. So Rianchi is going to share the learning targets with you and help you to unpack them before we start our lesson today. Rianchi.
learning target is a goal that you try to achieve during a lesson. Let's read the first learning target together. I can analyze and explain the components of an informative essay. Analyze means to look closely at something. Explain means that you can tell other people about the topic. Components are parts of a full piece. An informative essay is something that teaches you about the topic. That means we will look closely and tell others about the parts of a full piece. Let's look at our second learning target closely too. Please read it with me. I can understand how students learn to show what they've learned in writing. This means that you will be able to understand how we and other students write about our learning.
Thanks,
My name is Sonia and I'm a third grader at Floral Street School. The introduction of an essay has a hook that makes the audience interested in wanting to know more about what the author has to say. Hooks can be a question or an interesting fact. Also, the introduction gives background information on the topic. It's important for the readers to understand the topic and what's coming in the focus statement and proof paragraphs. However, there are no spoilers in the introduction. We don't want to give away too many facts or details.
Hi, my name is Anna Laura, and I am a third grader in Miss Gallagher's class at Patton School. Today I am here to talk about the role of the focus statement. The role of the focus statement is to talk about what the rest of the essay is going to be about, but not giving too much information away. The focus statement answers the research question and then tells the order of the rest of the paragraph. Point 1 and point 2 in the focus statement will tell the reader the topics of the two proof paragraphs.
Good evening. My name is Sydney Smith and I am a fourth grader at Coolidge School. I'm going to tell you about the first proof paragraph in a patent essay. The first proof paragraph gives details about the first point of the focus statement. This is why point 1 and proof paragraph 1 are both yellow. It also provides strong evidence and analyzes to support and explain the first point of the essay.
Hi, my name is Joseph Amante and I'm a 5th grade student at Sherwood Middle School. I'm going to be talking about the purpose of proof paragraph 2. The second proof paragraph gives details about the second point of the focus statement. Like the first proof paragraph, the second proof paragraph also gives the reader evidence from the text to explain the writer's thinking and ideas. It is important to make sure that the evidence is important to the overall topic and supports the second point of the focus statement. It is also important that the second proof paragraph includes a transition at the beginning of the paragraph so the reader knows that a new topic is being introduced, as well as how ideas in this paragraph connect to the ideas in the first proof paragraph.
Hello, my name is Parth Kapoor and I'm also a 5th grade student at Sherwood Middle School. I'm going to talk to you about the purpose of the concluding paragraph. The concluding paragraph wraps up the essay for the reader. It restates the focus for the reader and pulls all of the ideas together. It is like a summary for the essay. Also, the conclusion usually ends the essay by giving the reader something to think about, or it helps the reader know why the topic is important.
Great work.
Amazing already. Already blown away, and you haven't even done your little spiel yet.
All right, so we are ready to transition to work time. And because we are missing a few of our school committee members this evening, we are going to call on a few recruits from the crowd. I believe we're calling on Floral Street School Principal Lisa McCubry and Coolidge School Principal Tiffany Ostrander to come up and join us for work time. Thank you. All right, so before we begin our work time, I'm going to ask adults on the panel to please take turns reading the bullets of work time aloud to frame our experience. You may go in any order.
Each student author will partner with an adult on the panel.
Authors will display their informative essays which have been cut up into pieces.
Authors and panel members will collaborate to reassemble the essay piece by piece to match the painted essay structure.
Authors will read their essays aloud as panel members notice the components of effective informative writing using the criteria checklist.
If you do not finish in the time allotted, don't worry. Our authors' outstanding essays will be shared in their entirety.
Awesome. Thank you. You may notice that that word collaborate, and the reason that that stands out is because it's one of our EL habits of character that we work to instill in students. It goes along with other traits like responsibility, initiative, and all of which our amazing authors will demonstrate in this exercise to come. So now, authors, you may get your folder, and we are going to make sure that you have an adult to partner up with, and we're going to start our work time. Okay? All right, so stand on up. We'll make sure you get an adult to partner up with.
You're gonna be put to work again.
This is my oops, this election.
All right, well, there's 6 of them, right?
Yes.
Can you remind me again? Rianshi.
Come on out. All right, how are you?
So what are we gonna be working on?
I'm good, thank you. All right, what do we have?
Okay.
Okay.
My broken essay.
Okay, so you wrote this essay. Okay.
You can share that with me? Do I get to read it? Or do you read it to me?
I'm gonna read it to you, and you're gonna try to find out where this goes.
So we have
In
to
each-
put your
okay,
essay
great.
in order of what
There are several
the
physical
painting.
adaptations that keep the Amazon horned frog safe from danger. The
Okay.
first physical feature
So we're going to start with an introduction, right?
Tan, while male frogs skin on different
Should I read these out loud to
This helps
see
them
where
survive
we should
because
start?
the tan color makes the females easy to hide while the
So,
males
Wallace flying frogs have a few
Another
behavioral
physical feature of
adaptations
the
that
Amazon
help
horned
them
frog
survive.
is that they have
The
small
first
horns
behavioral
above their eyes,
adaptation is that the
which
Wallace
helps
flying
disguise
frogs
their
can
shape.
glide. Gliding
This
helps
helps
them
them survive because
predators.
they blend
Another
into the
behavioral
forest floor, which
adaptation
is
is
filled
that
with
the Wallace
leaves.
flying frog spends most of its
Finally,
lifetime
the
in
last
the
physical
treetop
feature of the Amazon horned frog
This helps them
is
by
that
staying
they
away
have
from a
an
large
enormous
amount
mouth
of
with
predators.
very sharp
These
teeth.
behavioral adaptations help the
According to the
Wallace flying
text,
frog
this helps
flying
them to eat their
frogs
prey when
survive.
they
So
go.
that seems pretty long. So that probably doesn't go at the beginning.
Okay.
So let's
The
go to a
introduction.
shorter one because I bet that's one of your
With this
starts. So let's do this.
there are several
The
physical
Wallace flying
adaptations
frog
that
has
keep
the
the
same
Amazon
prey as
frogs
other
safe.
kinds of frogs, but it has special features and behaviors that help them survive.
Because
Who would have thought that
it starts us off and it gets us,
Maybe.
launches us into
Wallace flying frogs have physical and behavioral adaptations that help
or
them
is it?
You should try again.
You think it's isn't the focus?
So I want something that catches me to read the story, right? That's how we start.
Okay.
Did you know that Wallace
So would that
flying
be this?
frog doesn't actually fly? Wallace flying frogs look like they're flying, but they're actually gliding. They can fly 50 feet in the air.
Okay.
And you're one of the biggest flying frogs in the world.
Look at these
The
two.
Wallace flying frog is
They're the
34
ones
feet
that
long.
right?
The
Yeah.
Driving force of
So
Southeast
this is
Asia.
also a really big paragraph. So
I mean, that catches
Oh,
me.
I'm saying. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this.
What
was
else am I
the
looking for in the beginning?
It's not.
it's fine.
Okay.
Focus
Okay.
statement.
So I would say this is either proof paragraph 1 or proof paragraph 2.
Oh, I
Right? Okay. Okay. Now I'm getting it. I'm getting it. Okay. All right. So now we read the next piece.
The first
Okay.
sentence sort of draws me in because you're asking a question, and I'm intrigued to keep going on.
It's hard because I don't know what the
Right?
focus statement.
Okay, so we're gonna go. This is our introduction, right? Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to go
Paragraph
to
1
Good job.
is it?
focus
Okay.
statement.
Great.
So let's see.
On there. Okay. Great.
Thinking. Wallace flying frogs have physical and behavioral adaptations that help them to survive.
So is this the introduction?
I
Okay.
feel like you're going to, with this, you might be able to write some bigger paragraphs to help me learn a little bit more about it.
Okay.
It would go at the end.
Oh, this is a source. Okay.
Yeah,
So it'd
all
be
right.
down here even further.
That
okay.
is great. Okay, so now we're going to go to
Okay.
our proof paragraph.
This one to you.
Okay.
In addition to these physical adaptations,
So I'm going to say,
have one behavioral adaptation,
both of these
which is that they
paragraphs
can catch
are
their prey
very
by ambushing
detailed.
it. This proves that because
I'm
they catch
going to
their prey
say
by ambushing it, it
these
allows
are
them to eat
probably
their prey without being seen.
paragraphs
It also allows them to eat in peace without animals stealing their food.
because you up here said that we were talking
So would that be the focus statement?
behavioral adaptations.
About 2 minutes
We're
left.
talking about our physical adaptations
Look at this.
help us
Oh,
Transition.
I
I
missed that.
read that
Find
one
the
before.
transition sentence.
Wallace
Yes, in
Line Park
addition
have a couple
to?
physical adaptations.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I missed that. That's great. Thank you.
Wallace Flying Frog is one of
Okay.
those. This helps them
Yep.
fly through the air.
That leaves
Another physical adaptation.
2 left.
Wallace
Okay.
Flying Frog has our stinky toe cap.
Okay, I'm gonna read
This helps them land safely.
While Amazon horned frogs
These
have
physical
great
adaptations.
physical and behavioral adaptations,
So that definitely, you said
they
that
have no
here in your
predators.
focus
There is such an
statement. So we're
amphibian.
talking about physical adaptations. So I'm going to say that that might be paragraph 1. And
Is that the focus statement?
I think you gave a lot of detail, and it helped me. So in your focus statement talking about this, that gave me some good evidence
I see. Okay.
what
And
you
it wouldn't
said
be
in
the
your
focus.
focus statement. Thank you. Some good reasons.
Yeah, well, it would be the first sentence on the last one.
I see.
Exactly. Is that right?
So
All right.
This would not
So then I'm going to say that this one is probably
Okay,
our
so the
paragraph 2
conclusion?
about the behavioral adaptations.
Because it
It's
says it so
the
wet.
same
Why
thing.
is it?
I see. It sums it all up at the
Yeah.
end. Okay.
Of your focus statement.
That leaves the only one left.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm going to say, so I'll read this again. This is going to be your conclusion. Wallace Flying Frog has the same prey as
That's
other
the
kinds of
focus.
frogs,
It's
but
just
has
one
special
sentence
features and
to get to
behaviors
what you need
that help them
right up
thrive.
front.
Who would have thought that a frog could fly? I think that's a good way to end it too. And you reflected back on the rest of your essay. This is an awesome essay.
That goes
You
there.
wrote this all by yourself?
Yes.
This is really, really good. This is awesome. Perfect job.
This sentence
Right.
kind of restates the focus statement.
How long did
At
this
the
take you to
at the end. Got it. In the conclusion.
All right, we're going to ask you to finish up those conversations, find a good stopping point.
Wow.
A-okay if you didn't make it all the way through.
You're an excellent teacher. You really taught me how this all works. Thank you very much. It's really good. Did you write this?
Students, you can pack those materials back up.
in a very short amount of time?
How did you
Who's
read
your
this
teacher?
and then helped you?
Miss Gallagher.
Your ideas?
Miss Gallagher's
Well,
here.
I usually put a source at the end.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know her? I think
Great, and when you're all set, students, you can return to your spot at the front table.
Great. Well, thank
Perfect
you so
job.
much for
All right.
walking me through that. It was
guess.
really
All right.
helpful.
You went back.
I
Good
really
job.
understand it a lot better now.
I'm very impressed. I hope that you're going to become an author. That's what I
Great writing.
I'm sure all of the adults on the panel noticed those traits that we were talking about: collaboration, perseverance, initiative, care for their work and for each other's. I'm sure that came through in those conversations. These are just,
Thank you
these
very
are
much.
the essays in their entirety so that they can be viewed.
Yeah. And I'm just going to take us through a very brief consolidation experience. So we're going to take a moment to reflect on our learning targets. And based on the information we shared with you, but most importantly, the heavy lift that you did while you worked with our students, take a moment to think about, can you now analyze and explain the components of an informative essay? And you can give a little private thumbs up by your heart about how you're feeling. Are we in the green, yellow, or red there? And then your second one, do you have a better understanding now of how students learn to show what they've learned throughout a module and do that in writing? You can give that little thumb as well. And thank you so much, and let's give a great round of applause to our scholars.
First
Thank you. Thanks for taking time on the end of the day after great school day time. This is very stressful for me. But it looks like I learned a lot, so I should steal the template so I can practice it at home or in the office. But it's very impressive how they learn first thing, and then how they try to explain. Sydney did a wonderful, fantastic job, which we ended up discussing a lot, thorough, in depth about the topic and everything. So thank you, Sydney, and rest of the students. So the data tells the examples supports what data is telling. So it matches what we are looking at the data just shared. So it's very, very impressive, and we're all looking forward to keep this momentum continue into the middle school. And then fill the gap. Kudos to all the teachers, educated staff, support staff, parents, especially students, of course. Keep up the good work, and we'll look forward to seeing the progress next year when you're in the middle school.
Let's give them one more round of applause and include their teachers. Again, the more you read, the more you know. The more you know, the smarter you grow, and it's so fun to see you guys get so smart. And even the audience is inspired. People are watching you, not just on TV tonight. And you're making an impact on your classmates and future generations. So kudos to all of you. So I think we have something for our...
Well, I think there's more comments
more comments.
before we
Okay,
wrap
sorry.
up.
I'll be quick. So impressive. You guys should be so proud of yourselves. Your essays were amazing. I'm so impressed with how you can write at 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and also presenting in front of all these adults in front of you. Amazing job. You should turn around and look at your teachers and thank them for their hard work and yes. And thank you to all of you. You are super learners. I hope you're proud of yourself. This is not easy to read and write and have it be a nice, fluid story that you can follow around with. I wouldn't have thought, I was working with Anna Laura, you would not have thought that a 3rd grader wrote about frogs like that. So good job. This is obviously, I'll make some comments later, but the proof is in the pudding. And the pudding was good tonight. So thank you for the hard work to our teachers and to our staff for working so closely and really guiding these students. Amazing job. I'm really impressed by how this program has worked out.
Thank you all for coming tonight and for sharing your learning with us. So impressive. I'm so happy to see this focus on writing this year. You know, last year we talked a lot about reading and understanding, and this year to see how all this wonderful work that you're doing on your writing. It's so impressive. I learned a lot, and I think how you're structuring your essays in this grade level is just going to serve you so well as you get older in middle school and high school and even college, because you're learning like the foundations of how to write a really solid essay. And it's really, really impressive. So thank you all for coming tonight and for sharing, and to your teachers and your parents for all their support of your great work. Thank you so much. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Parth and Joseph and Sydney and Anna Laura and Soumya and Rianshi, I was so impressed. I hope someday you choose to go into the profession all these folks have gone into. To be educators, because clearly you have a talent for that. You have a talent for writing. Obviously, there's lots of things that you can do, and you're going to have a great foundation to do it with. It was so sophisticated. I worked with Rianshi, and I think the way that she plans out her essays is exactly what I know adults do when they're trying to decide how they're going to write something, a report, an essay, something to inform people. And it was just so skillfully done, and she was excellent at teaching me the way that to go about doing it. There was a couple tips I might use during these next few months as I have to write some different things. But I want to certainly thank our students, thank their teachers. I want to thank our instructional coaches and curriculum coordinator for the hard work they've been doing to support our teachers and implementing this program over the last few years. and certainly our principals, some of whom are here tonight, to work with to help lead that process, and of course Ms. Clowder, who's done, I've seen firsthand in my work with her the enormous amount of time and effort that's gone into making this implementation of a really very significant shift in the way that we teach to make it successful. And as we saw in the data, we're starting to see what we were hoping for, which was growth over time for our students. So, but again, our students did a wonderful job. Congratulations. We have something for you. So what we'd like for you to do in a moment is to come up and you're going to shake the school committee members' hands and mine. And I have a certificate for each of you. And after you get the certificates, we're going to have you stand right in front here with those certificates, and so we'll give your parents a chance to take some photos. Does that sound okay? All right, so why don't you come on up. Parth, you can lead the way. Come right up to Mr. Velagapudi here. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Over there for a moment.
Thank you.
Joseph,
Great job.
well done.
Great job. Great job. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for teaching me tonight.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
Sydney, excellent job. Well done. And we have Sonia. Congratulations. Great job. And my teacher, Riachi. Great work. All right, so you guys are natural at this. You're ready for the paparazzi. We're good?
Yeah.
How about one more round of applause?
Don't forget to take all this great stuff with you. You might be called on to teach somebody else in the future. Yeah.
So proud of you. Thank you. Did an awesome job, kiddo. Both deserve a certificate. Nice job.
So the next item on our agenda this evening is the fiscal year 2027 Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Budget Report. We've had an enclosed report in our packets. It provides a curriculum instruction and assessment fiscal year 2027 budget overview that includes information on key areas of budget responsibility, key investments, use of grant funds, and optimization of additional resources. It outlines proposals for this year's budget in FY27. Ms. Clowder will present the report, be available for questions this evening.
That's a hard act to follow. It is. But I think I can't think of a better testament to the importance of my aspect of a larger budget.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, the proof is in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you.
So this slide just outlines the areas of key responsibilities for curriculum instruction and assessment, which include kind of covering the curriculum materials that students shared with you today, ensuring that there is professional resources for professional learning, coordinating kind of the state and local assessment cycles, and then facilitating PD, both for educators within the district and also for leaders within the district. Some aspects of the budget are predictable. Every year we're going to need to buy new student workbooks and have specific investments for different levels when curriculum materials outlive their usefulness. So for example, we started using Foundation's materials. We're starting to see some fraying of the boards that kids use, we can predict that we're going to have to replace those, not every year, but on a regular basis. Then there are other resources like subscriptions and memberships, which we can anticipate renewal for, but the cost increase from year to year is less predictable. And purchasing new materials is important because it's a matter of staying current, sometimes staying in compliance, and making sure, most of all, that students have an equitable learning experience. So when we fund that out of the appropriated budget, we make sure that there's similar experiences for kids by grade across the district. Other aspects of the district shift from year to year, particularly when it comes to professional learning. So summer PD curriculum work, early release days are funded through a combination of the appropriated budget, sometimes grant funds, sometimes portions of which come out of my budget. And I'll talk more about what that overall pie looks like on a later slide. But I think it's important for everyone listening and tuning in at home to know that when we make budget decisions, we start by thinking about what our strategic priorities are and what it will take to move them forward. And our goals are ambitious, and as you've seen, our educators are really hardworking. So my charge is to kind of make sure that we're both supporting student needs in the classroom and also educator needs, and making sure that they have enough support in terms of what they're doing in order to move our students forward as well. And one example of how our budget from strategic priorities translate into practice is what you just saw in terms of the literacy investment. So this was the first year of full implementation, K-8. We needed to provision materials last year to make sure that 7th and 8th grade had the same materials that the K-6 teachers did. And that's one piece of like starting out with the curriculum. But making sure that we have new materials is approximately $150,000, which is up $7,000 from the previous year in terms of curriculum materials just for literacy. And then we also have resources designed to support professional learning, so in the form of the consultant, Kristen Osborne, who was initially funded through a grant, but is also really key in terms of coaching us and improving professional practice. And finally, some things that become compelling over time as we recognize emerging student needs. So one of the things that's part of the key investments that you'll see in my budget details relating to literacy is that I really want to advocate for buying additional texts for students at Sherwood, so that in addition to learning about the topic that's featured in the curriculum, they have some choice and voice to have book clubs around other related topics. And I think that would go a long way to kind of fueling the culture that Mr. Kelly has built around reading at Sherwood this year. And you know, I'm aware that it's been some time since we looked at classroom libraries, and trying to foster that culture is going to take some time, but that's something I'm thinking about in my head is how I can support that through the same equity lens that we talked about with curriculum. So we're not just funding literacy. So this is an example of kind of how the strategic priorities become budget priorities. But next year you'll see that, you know, with each department, as we considered kind of what the asks were from the district leadership team, there were things coming from world language, there were things coming from the math department. All of that from curriculum materials filters through consideration in terms of my lens, and often I can use my appropriated funds to support those asks. So next year, as you noted in your report, I'll be looking to kind of provision for the next level of French textbooks that we bought level 1 this year. We need to anticipate those students will need another level book. Next year in French, we need an intermediate curriculum materials for students who are at the intermediate stage of language development for some of our English learners. That's not all of it that's in there, but that gives you a sense of kind of the curriculum instruction perspective of the budget. I think tonight's also an opportunity, and now they're all gone, but it's an opportunity to acknowledge the hard work of the curriculum team, because all of them work really tirelessly to further academic excellence in Shrewsbury. And I'm really grateful for your advocacy in growing that team to include reading specialists. And one of the key asks that you will no doubt note in my report is the request for a math specialist for the middle level, which would bring the number of people on the curriculum instruction and assessment team to 27. It's actually 28 because I count Liz Tedesco, and I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my skillful administrative assistant who serves me and everybody else in the district really well. But they also require kind of professional learning, and so while that's less visible than kind of the student learning, that's another aspect in terms of how I plan my budget dollars. Another piece is kind of the aspects of the curriculum needs that we don't necessarily anticipate until we see them in action. So we talked a little bit about the worn out aspect of some of our foundation materials. Instructional rounds where we visit each school on a schedule, 3 times a year formally with me and other curriculum leaders to kind of see the implementation in action and notice where some innovations happening, where some things that we might want to support. That teacher's doing something really efficient with that tool. Everybody should have one of those rather than having teachers buy them. And also we hear about what's working in terms of professional learning and what teachers are hungry for more of. Sometimes we hear, less emphasis on this, please. We want more of this. And that drives some of our planning in terms of the PD aspect of things. Of course, not every ask can be funded at once, and that's why kind of we look at planning over time. So when I look at the whole budget pie for curriculum instruction and assessment, it's divided into roughly 9 slices or spending categories. By far the biggest, that blue slice, is educational supplies and instructional equipment. There's a wide range of things within that blue slice, including kind of hands-on materials like workbooks and math manipulatives, to software like ST Math, Desmos, and Alex in math that allow for more personalized learning, and adaptive software that helps kind of predict what this student needs versus this other student. Sora in ELA, which helps kids access library books through their iPads. And altogether, contracts for new software total about $140,000 for next year. Part of that is because we renewed Alex last year for a 5-year extended contract, and where we can get efficiency by having longer contracts, we try to do that. But if there's not considerable savings, we don't. So one of the things that Liz does to contribute is to look at what are all of the contracts when they're expiring and work with me to kind of get a really good rate for things like that. So as we work to look at the diversity of our schools, and we're mindful of what our teachers need for updated resources, and we want to make sure that kids can see themselves in our curriculum materials, it's really important to kind of consider what new things we might need. So that additional $54,000 that you see in my budget proposal for FY27 kind of includes all of those things. And then there are much smaller aspects of the pie that talk about like the contracted services and things like that. This graph really shows kind of the curriculum instruction and assessment budget by fiscal year, what that's looked like over time. You can see this adds all of the slices together to be that one column, with FY20 in the purple until FY27 in the red. It's the proposed budget. You can see the pre-override were not good years for us. And then looking at recent years, you notice the budget increase as we sought to get grant funds to use the ELA curriculum more consistently. And then finally, you can see the slight increase proposed for next year based on the recommendation from the DMG consulting group. We have a lot of needs that are driven by different levels. So we look at CTE at the high school, for example, versus kind of literacy and basic curriculum renewals at the lower levels, and kind of thinking about what needs to fit within that budget increase, given all the grant climate, is kind of a juggling act. But I'm really pleased to say that we've benefited from a lot of outside funding for professional learning that's left me to have more dollars to buy some of those materials needs. And I'm really grateful for the Department of Education, elementary and secondary education, for at least providing us continued access to cohorts for professional learning. This shows kind of what the components of the budget are, with the blue being the appropriated funds and the red being what we get from grant funding. You can see that orange is when we had the ESSER funding that is now kind of gone, and then we've had to think a little bit about how we spend our remaining funds wisely. Typically, we can expect that we have stable grants from one year to another. So you don't see the red on the latest column for proposed FY27 because we don't really know what that number is going to be until August. But most recently, unfortunately, we heard that while most grants are going to remain stable, we can expect a 15% reduction in our Title I funds, and those funds are used to support literacy. That doesn't mean that we're not going to support literacy, it just means that those dollars now have to come from somewhere else. This slide shows kind of what we get from our federal entitlement grants. These are the allocations and what their purposes are. So Title I, for example, I just mentioned is for literacy. That's primarily a student-facing grant, as is Title IV. Title III, also student-facing to support English learners. And Title IIA is used to fund professional development. And one of the things that you notice if you kind of look at these grant funding over time is that they increase a little bit, but they don't always keep pace with the category for which they're needed. So our mentoring program, which is terrific, I mean, we have a really high rate of teachers returning and a lot of skillful teachers in the district, always exceeds my Title II budget funds. Mm-hmm. So not only does it not cover enough for just mentoring new teachers, but there's nothing left over for any other professional learning. And I think that context is important for people to understand because, again, that puts pressure on the remaining pieces of the pie. And it's partly why at every opportunity we seek grants and say yes to cohorts that are sponsored by DESE because that offsets that loss. So in terms of our challenges, there are just fewer competitive grant opportunities in the landscape. I have a couple of potential opportunities that I hope to tell you about in the near future because every time there's a possible application, I go for it or I support my team in going for that. DESE has continued to partner with us around kind of a high quality implementation cohort for other districts implementing EL, for example. We do have to apply, but we've not been denied so far. And that's really helped our coaches to grow their capacity to kind of think about how to support teachers in effective planning. And that, while that's directed at adult learning, that also plays a role in the pacing that then supports student outcomes. And I think one of the things that's really, we're all grappling with, this is a really tough time for everybody, is general uncertainty, that there's not been as many challenges to public education, that I can remember, certainly when I started off as a teacher, and wanting to make sure that, we're sensitive to inflation in curriculum and instruction, just as people are experiencing it at the grocery store. So while I would like to say that typically we've had relatively reasonable rates, and Mr. Girardi calculates that very well for us, we don't really know what a publishing company is going to charge us for Renaissance next year. And although I try to bargain effectively on our behalf, ultimately we really need that assessment system to kind of continue to monitor student progress. I also meant to go back to this slide and say, Mr. Girardi deserves credit for this stacked graph because I couldn't build something that sophisticated. We replicated it. So I am available to take questions. I think the report goes into more detail about how we spend funds and what the curriculum instruction pie is about. But it's important to acknowledge not everything that is covered in curriculum instruction comes from my funds alone.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Colin, you?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A couple quick questions regarding the slide. I think it's 9. I don't know. It's slide 5. So I'm trying to see the numbers there. So there are 2 different colors. It's just trying to understand. Is mean anything or?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I should have. I'm still riding the excitement of the student presentation. So the gold numbers are the existing. These are the people working within the curriculum department right now. Mm-hmm. So we have 7 elementary coaches, 2 at our larger schools and 1 each at our smaller elementary schools. We have 4 middle school coordinators, 1 for each content area across Sherwood and Oak. We have 4 content directors at the high school. And we have 6 K-12 district leaders. So for like the performing arts department or the visual arts department, for example, or Christina Manos and her team. But this number would have been 5. Because we have 5 reading specialists, but for the proposed addition of a math specialist, so I made that 6 to show the request, and then that changes my 26 to a 27.
Oh, okay. So that's not 7 and 7 plus 6 is like 13 new. No, it's not.
Yeah. 27 is the total number of
Okay.
proposed staff for FY27, assuming that the request for the math specialist is approved and goes through.
Okay, wonderful.
But thanks for asking, because I meant to say that.
No, I was like curious there. Thanks for the clarification. The second question I have on the last slide 7, with all the software and everything, do we pay them annually, or do we enter into a multi-year contract so that it's more predictable?
We can enter into multi. This is something that I talked about with Mr. Collins, Chris's predecessor, for a while. We are allowed to do that, but sometimes it benefits us and sometimes it doesn't. So, for example, the company Renaissance that produces the STAR reading and STAR math assessment, that contract is around $92,000 a year. When they extended us, I said, well, what would it be if we committed to you for 3 years? It was around the same price, so we weren't saving any money. That's in stark difference to the Alex contract, where for a multi-year contract we get a significant reduction. And sometimes software companies are bundled together with it's the same parent company owns the software that owns a curriculum that we're using, and often that's a better way to get a good deal. But it really varies by company, and sometimes it feels to me a little bit like other factors in our budget that we don't have a control over what the inflation rate is.
Right. Thanks for the clarification. And then there's some like stipends, curriculum development stipends and professional development stipends. So where this money, is it going to students or the teachers?
It's going to teachers. So we have 2 teacher leaders at each grade level, for example, for literacy, who are pilot teachers who have implemented ahead of their peers, who are looking at the assessments and gathering up student work and exemplars, because next year, in addition to tracking student progress through STAR, we're going to be tracking, as we assess students' writing, we're going to be tracking that kind of more systematically. And so having examples and having teachers that do that work, so they get money at the curriculum rate to kind of think about how to support their peers in implementing this and to serve as peer models. So they had to be willing to host other people in their classroom and teach kind of lessons for new teachers in particular, and also to collaborate across the district. So we have a 3rd grade teacher from one building and a 3rd grade teacher from another, really comparing notes as to, I think this is meets the benchmark for the writing standard. What did you find? And that serves as kind of a teacher voice in the process of what the coaches and I are noticing in terms of implementation. It's just as important to elicit from teachers what they're noticing, and that serves as another voice for them. But that's not the only stipend. There are, for example, when Ken was here talking about world language standards, we had to do some substantial work to help people get familiar with and unpack those standards. That's a good work to do over the summer. I spent a substantial chunk of the curriculum budget on summer curriculum work last year, about $10,000 more than I typically do. So I save a bit of money knowing that is something that is going to be important.
2 questions, I think, very quickly. So one is related to the medical interpretation pathway.
Yeah.
So we looks like we allocated 20,000 or requesting 20,000, but is that all? I think there may be an expansion if we gonna have that program continuing the provided to students. There may be a overhead cost, staff cost associated to that. So what would be the guesstimate on rough estimate for that? The budget.
That was my rough estimate. I just wanted to kind of remind everyone that there would likely be some costs associated with it. We're still gaining familiarity with what those costs might be, and so just as we might use an outside vendor for a course that we don't offer at the high school, we might need to do that. We also might have some certification costs, and we're still developing what an internship might look like. And so for me, that was just more like trying to be fiscally responsible and think we probably need to have a set aside in order to move forward with this. But it's very fluid right now, and I don't have specific details. We definitely will, because if we're going to build the program and run it as a course, we need to make sure that we're ready to do that. But that really was my guesstimate, informed by kind of what Ken had found in looking at local districts, I think namely Hudson High School that's doing it.
One last one and then I'll stop.
No.
So with the Title I, is it like 15% like comes down to a solid dollar number, 30 to 34,000, 35,000?
About 34,000.
34,000?
Yep.
So, but is that sure, or is just still in works? Like
it was a signal that we got from the Department of Education. It's a federal entitlement grant, so they are getting a signal from the federal level that there's going to be a reduction, and they're passing that signal on to us so that we can plan effectively. But we get our grant allocations in August, so it's really
could be going anyways.
I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah, we learned this on a webinar with the department since our last meeting, and essentially, then the piece that they wanted to make us aware of is that what we had been hearing and from a lot of different sources is that Congress has already passed the federal funding for grants, entitlement grants, for next fiscal year. Those dollars are solid. That's the good news, and they basically passed them all with minor changes at the national level, essentially level funded, including Title I. What the officials from DESE were telling us is that because of some, every year they update census numbers that they use to determine how much money gets distributed to different states, and it's all based on a share of how many low-income students are in your state. The Massachusetts census is dropping in that sense, and therefore the number of dollars that are going to come from Washington is going to be less for the state as a whole by about, and they're saying plan for about a 15% reduction. So, when we come back with our final budget recommendation for you to vote to send to town meeting, we're going to be looking for how might we shift $34,000 from something that's in there right now, because we're at our cap, to counter for that in some way. And of course, and that's looking at different elements, right? We might be looking at, whether that's other elements of our program, or if it's would be straight out of moving some dollars in the appropriated budget. So that remains to be seen, but not a huge impact, but it's still, that's essentially the cost, give or take, of a literacy tutor. So we don't want to, reducing our support where we don't need to. So, but that's new news to us, very, very recent.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm going to actually do a couple comments from the last presentation because it ties into to this one. I say this every single time that you come and you bring students. This is one of my favorite times that you bring them, because for me, we can look at all these numbers and we can look at all the stats that come back, but it really, seeing the students here and seeing what the investments that we've made, the hard work that the teachers, our specialists, everything that goes into it, when the students are here and they're going through their presentations with us, it's actually it's incredible to really see what's coming out. It's not just us, it's not just you coming to us and saying, oh, this is an incredible program. We actually are able to see that. And the fact that the numbers are going the way that they should is fantastic. I mentioned this to Dr. Sawyer earlier. Thank you for putting that slide into our report that showed where students, when they get tested in September, and then we are able to track. That is exactly what I wanted to see, because I wanted to see, like, at the beginning of the year when we test them and this is where they are and we're following that progress. To me, that also shows the tremendous work that the students are putting in, that the teachers are putting. It tells a different story. And I know that it's data, but to me, that's more compelling to me, which brings me into I'm very much in support of having the math specialist, because that's something that, obviously literacy is still very important to us and we want to continue to do that. But I think also, with seeing our math numbers, and especially at that middle level, being able to invest in those services, if we're seeing what we're seeing at the literacy EL level, if we're putting similar resources in at the math level, that is also an incredible, and I would love, when, if we're able to pass that and have that start, to see what that looks like as well going through. But I think, having those presentations to us, it really, for me, it's more compelling because we're able to see what those investments came in. So I appreciate you doing that, and really it's a lot of work for you, for your teachers, and the specialists. So thank you.
It's well worth it. That's
Yeah,
kind of our
I love
favorite
it.
night. And I thought it was a great idea. The reading specialists will continue to track that, so we'll be able to kind of look at those cohorts by grade over the course of this year, but then into next. I'm trying to figure out how do we do that from one year to the next, because sometimes looking at the class of 2036 makes my head spin a little bit. But I think we could look within those strands of those, the pink dot graph, to kind of track how do kids move in and out, because one of the things the research tells us is that when kids transition to a new level, they sometimes regress. And so we want to see what's the transition from grade 4 to grade 5, and so it's really helpful to do that. The other piece that I probably should have mentioned related to the middle school statistics is, in addition to the move-ins, one of the things we've noticed is that you start to reflect on what you're hearing with the STAR screener, and you're thinking, well, this kid was proficient, and now we're seeing some issues in spelling that shows like things are not as solid as the assessment would suggest. We need to do some other assessments, and so when we found a small group of kids at the middle level who essentially have incredible memorization skills, and so they memorized a vast amount of vocabulary, and STAR was testing their understanding or their ability to read syllables, 1 and 2 syllable words. They hit the middle level, and they've got multiple multisyllabic words because we're giving them this rich, complex text, and it's revealing that some of their foundational skills are lacking. Didn't necessarily show up in the numbers in grade 4, and so we've done some additional testing, and we're going to pull that kid back into and support them and shore that up so that they can generalize, because typically sometimes you see a kid who's very skillful at reading, but their spelling is kind of atrocious, and when that happens, that's what's going on. And not atrocious, that's probably not the right word, but there's a discrepancy between what they can do as readers and what they can spell. And so that's something that we're paying more attention to, and since we have fewer kids who are coming into the middle level at tier 3, we can do more support of the kids that are there. So that's another factor with older readers that we didn't anticipate, until we started really following the data closely. But I'm happy to do that, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the report and for having the students in. It was just a wonderful, wonderful night. I wanted to thank you for moving towards the DMG recommendation in your thoughtful planning for this year, in terms of a little bit less reliance on grants for some of these core materials that we need. I think they do need to start being built into our budget, and not being relied on that we're going to be able to get grant funding, because these are core materials that we need to incorporate into our budget. I thought maybe it'd be helpful if you could give us a little flavor of what you foresee, like the math specialist bringing to the table, for if we're able to fund that position this year.
Yeah, so obviously spanning 2 middle schools is a huge task, but I think we'd need to first identify where is the effective intervention happening, and Melissa McCann and John and his team and Hallie and her team have done some deep thinking about this. I think part of it is the most effective area to intervene wouldn't be all of the math skills, so they're kind of amalgamated in a STAR score. We would want to focus really narrowly on number sense and kids that are 2 years below kind of where we would expect them to see operationally, and then develop either a combination in-house screener or some aspect of STAR that's really specific to number sense to identify those tier 3 kids, and then prioritize who needs the most support. In terms of building the schedule, I think we're fortunate that we've got 2 principals who are highly collaborative, and they both said, listen, the position needs to go where the need is. So if we have a common screener and we find out that most of the need is at Sherwood, that person's going to spend most of their time at Sherwood. And then, we can think a little bit about continuing to do, we do have interventions in place in both schools. So we have some capacity for intervention. It's just not the equivalent of the specialized support we have for literacy. And I'm sure that, just as our reading data cycles were informed by the expert advice of our reading specialists, a math specialist would have some strong sense of how to prioritize kids in need. But we would need to have a common benchmark. We'd need to have progress monitoring tools. We'd need to have kind of a sense about a caseload. I mean, in my head, I have a groups that are really small, like 2 or 3, but I need to do some research to say, is that true for math the way it's true for literacy? I tend to think yes, but it's also harder to kind of determine groups without knowing more about the students. You wouldn't want to put, 3 kids that are struggling with 2 different operations in the same group. And we'd have to kind of think about the schedule. Where is that going to fit? And how do we make room for that? So that kids are not missing their Tier 1 math instruction to get math support, just as we're really holding sacred their reading instruction when we're wanting to give them reading support.
Thank you.
So those are some of the next steps. I have a whole kind of draft document that we're building to kind of think about this, so that we can hit the ground running and not waste time.
Great.
If it's approved and moves forward.
Thank you. Dr.
Ma-
Sawyer? Oh, yes.
May I ask one quick question? With the percentile over time, it's a 69 percentile. The chart, the graph that's we're showing. So where does the average state, Massachusetts, lie in that?
Massachusetts is one of the top states in the nation in terms of achievement rates, and so we have geared our percentile rank in STAR to kind of look at what's the equivalent of success on the MCAS, and STAR will look at other districts that have that same cut score as a comparison basis. They also have like a proprietary formula. So when we've asked, like, how do you determine how, we've got a kid who's a high achiever, and the benchmark score seems good, but their percentile rank is different. Like, what's the secret sauce? And it's like, they won't tell us what the secret sauce is. They're kind of guessing at, this is what's expected at the end of the year. This is where this kid is now, and it's a predictive tool where they are relative to other kids that have taken the test. But essentially, it's good to have a comparison of like the kids who are working towards the state benchmarks. That's one measure, and proficiency. And when parents get a report that goes home, it gives them, here's how your kid is growing relative to other kids. Here's how they're performing percentile rank-wise relative to other kids in the nation, because that's a normed score. And then here's where they are in terms of the predictor for the state benchmark. So there's 3 different measures, and I understand your question. It is kind of confusing, but it's like they're essentially performing better than 69% of their kids at the national level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Sawyer?
Thank you. Maybe just before I make a comment, Ms. Clowder, can you expand a little bit about the difference between some of the purchases of physical materials, textbooks, workbooks, math manipulatives you mentioned?
Yep.
We also have software programs, ST Math, Alex, things that can only be done digitally. There's no equivalent in a physical book. And then there's some textbooks that come with a digital version.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, I know when we first rolled out the iPad, there was more movement in the field towards digital-only versions of things that you could get less expensively. Can you talk a little bit what the landscape's like right now?
I think there's a couple of factors. One is the kind of research-based, and the other is kind of practic-based, and what the publishing powerhouse have figured out in the interim. Initially, the idea was, well, we won't have to purchase expensive textbook, and kids won't have to throw their backs out with these really heavy backpacks because they're going to have an iPad, and all of the things will be accessible there. And it's true that some of the adaptive software tools we're using, like ST Math and Alex, they're not linked to a textbook per se, but they're really helpful in personalizing learning targets for individual kids. And so those things are still very valuable on the iPad. ST Math we get some grant funding for because we were awarded that competitive grant, and we've stayed through the 1-8 Foundation and part of that cohort. Alex is more expensive. Alex is a tool that is also adaptive math support for kids as they're practicing in, it's a co-curricular activity with their math class. And it happens to be owned by the parent company that owns some of our math curriculum. So that is probably why we get a better rate for them. But it's not something that kids are using. They're using it for very specific learning targets in conjunction with their math class. So at the high school, there's like some focus on, this is an Alex Day. I've designed this pathway for you. I want you to really think about what your learning goals are so you can shore up this hole that you have when it comes to statistics, for example. And then as a group, we're going to talk about this topic. And kids have that as an independent practice tool. When we purchased EL, it comes with online tools, and our grade 4 teachers have kept that online tool because it enables them to administer the assessments in EL in the way that they would see them when they take the MCAS. And so we see the value of having kids practice keyboarding in authentic contexts and kind of use that way. But the research around students reading and also in writing is that they're going to retain more information and stay more engaged and less distracted if they're reading a physical book. So we can access the EL curriculum for planning purposes electronically, but we don't want kids learning electronically. And we said no to a curriculum that we looked at the middle level that was essentially all iPad because we saw a lot of swiping. And kids said to us in the focus groups, I feel like every time I finish something, I get another thing to read on the iPad, and I'm not sure where the thing I just did went. And I was like, that is not what we want for middle schoolers, and they didn't find it engaging. In comparison with kind of the conversations that kids are having around reading a common text and the ability that they have to annotate it and write it up, that really helps. You saw today kind of their effort in writing, with the hands-on activity and painting that same thing. So it's still a powerful learning tool. We're not doing anything bad to kids giving them an iPad. We're just really judicious about what tasks we're going to do with concrete materials when we need to buy books and have them available for kids, particularly because of the research about their focus on devices. And then we also want to continue to personalize learning paths so that we can have them get challenged in the areas that they want to grow. We have some kids that are just really excited to move through those paths and puzzles in ST Math, and also shore up some of the skills that we see lagging. And particularly for kids that move in, it's really helpful to have them placed in a math class and know that we can provide some support for them to kind of close some of those gaps. For people who move in at the high school level, for example, with a different program that's not integrated, that's really helpful. And so they would advocate, there's great results for kids as a result of having that tool.
Is it fair to say that we're not, the days of like if you buy the digital version, you save a lot of money, you're not?
Absolutely.
Basically, you need to purchase,
There's
they come together, but there's no.
You can't unbundle things. And when we unbundled EL and just said we only want it for grade 4, they're like, this is very unusual. I was like, it might be, but that's what we're going to do. I'm pretty sure we don't have to buy the digital version of anything. Well, you might not have access to, and I think increasingly publishers have figured out that if they want the physical thing and I link to the digital subscription, then I can charge a bigger price, and that's more how they're bundled. So the days of being able to switch to an iPad and access all the curriculum you want, that's not there.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Ms. Clowder for the report, the work she's done with her team. Obviously we're trying to continue to build more capacity within the year-to-year budget so we can have predictable expenditures on core curriculum materials, and not that we're replacing everything every year. We've never been really, on a super quick replacement cycle, but we're certainly in a much healthier place than we were prior to the override. But every year, Ms. Clowder's making decisions based on the feedback from her team and the directors and all those folks about what makes the most sense and what, in terms of what we need to replace or purchase anew. Whether that's high school AP texts or whether that's a middle school science piece or whether that's an elementary element of the curriculum. But appreciate all the different information and the thoughtful planning, and this will be, again, one piece of the puzzle of the whole budget that we'll continue to work through as we head towards a final recommendation in April.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda this evening is a proposed fiscal year 2027 budget public hearing. The public and members of the school department are invited to provide input to the committee and the administration regarding the FY27 budget. This public hearing meets the requirements of Massachusetts state law, which requires school districts to provide an opportunity for members of the public to be heard regarding the proposed school budget. I don't believe anyone's here this evening to speak, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda. The next item on our agenda this evening is approval of minutes. The minutes from the school committee meeting held on February 25th, 2025 were enclosed. Does anyone have any corrections or changes? They will be accepted as distributed. And I believe that concludes our meeting this evening. We do not need to go into executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Will do roll call vote. Mr. Velagapudi?
Aye.
Ms. Sharif Kapoor?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you and good night.